I'm joined today by Deacon Tracey Hume, who's the Community Engagement Enabler for Newcastle District. Tracey, you've been doing a lot of work with the heat bank project and what that does to provide people with warm spaces. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about, well, what is a warm space or a heat bank?
Yeah, so we're in Gateshead, we call them warm spaces, and it was an initiative by Gateshead Council. All councils have been given a household support fund, and Gateshead have chosen to use some of this money to provide spaces across the borough where people can come and literally get warm for a couple of hours, and maybe get a warm cuppa or potentially a bowl of soup, something like that, just somewhere to be so they don't have to have their heating on at home. Or potentially cook one of their meals and just reduce their utility bills. And these will be in community spaces across the borough.
And so why is that so important at this particular time?
So the cost of living crisis we've all heard about in the news as headlines. It's predicted that the average utility or the heating and electric and gas and everything else bills across a year are going to go up in September to over £3,200 for an average household, which means that the percentage of your income is significantly going to be spent on utilities. And we already know that food has gone up in price, petrol's gone up in price, so our all our budgets are being squeezed massively, but heating in the winter particularly, autumn and winter, is one of those things you can't sit there and be cold. We know it affects people's mental health. We know it affects people's physical health. We know that people can end up in hospital because of all the related issues of being cold. So this is about a way of saying, we know this is an issue, and it's not just an issue for people who have traditionally maybe been seen as people who are struggling financially. This is going to impact on everybody, and more people are going to be wanting somewhere that they can just reduce their outgoings a little bit by just having somewhere else to keep warm rather than putting their own heating on for a little while.
Thanks for that. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of churches that are starting to think about, well, is this something that we could do something about? We've got a building, we've got some people, we might have some links into our community already. Surely there must be something we can do. What advice would you give to a church that was thinking about, well, can we be a warm space or part of warm spaces?
Yeah, there's a few things you can do. I mean, for a starter, I think one of the reasons why Gateshead approached the churches was they said, well, your buildings are often in the best places. They're in central places where people can easily get to. So you're already at an advantage to some other places. Churches are traditionally really good at making a good cuppa and providing some refreshments. This isn't a sort of a skill set that we haven't got. This is something we're known for. Methodists are known for being able to put on an afternoon tea or something like that. So let's make use of our gifts and resources that God has given us, really. So one of the things is, if you have got links with the community, is to ask some of the folk around, would this be something you think would be helpful in our community? Don't make assumptions that one size fits all about what we provide, but do you think that would be a good idea? Maybe if so, what time of the day might work? Would breakfast be better, or would a mid-morning or lunchtime or mid-afternoon? What would work in terms of when people need it the most, or when people are passing at that time of the day? Is it people when they've just dropped the kids off at school and haven't had breakfast? Is it people who need a bit of lunch, and then it means they don't have to put their cooker on or the kettle on for a bit? So have a little conversation. The other thing to do is go and approach local councillors and ask if there's any initiative happening across your council area that you could link in with already. So within Gateshead, they decided that they wanted to use part of their household support fund that every council's been given to provide these warm spaces. So they're providing up to £500 grants for churches and public spaces to be able to put on something free for people to come for an hour or two a day, once a week. So it might be to get a hot cuppa or some soup or whatever, but the money would help you to provide that for free, so nobody had to pay out. But it also can be used to pay for towards a utility bill, so that you can pay a little bit towards that fuel bill to keep that building open, because that's going to be the other concern. Our church is in the same boat. We're all struggling financially with our giving and other things because of COVID and the cost of living. So, you know, it might be some funding available. So ask your counsellor, is there a little pot of money we might be able to access to help us to do this well and free for our community? And just make sure that we can just liaise with people a little bit. And there may be people in the community who would like to come and help host that with you. So it might not always have to be all of church volunteers. You might find some other people would love to be able to help out in some way over this winter.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And as you say, it's good to know that there are other people who might be interested in supporting, and that there might be funding available, and absolutely speak to your local council. Is there anything else in particular you'd say to the church that says, well, you know, there's not that many of us and we're quite busy already, and there's not a lot of money left in the bank account at the moment? Kind of, can we really make a difference? What would you say to them?
Me would say, if in a cost of living crisis, when people are struggling around us in our community, we can't make that choice to try and do something, then maybe we're missing something about what it is to be followers of Jesus in that community this time. If we can't, because we've got lots of restrictions, you know, that are out of our control, understandable, is that if we're having to make a choice between something we've done for a while that we could maybe lay down for a few months during the winter, might not be something you have to put down permanently, but if you've been meeting on a Thursday for a women's fellowship or something like that, you know, what about saying, well, actually, over the winter, we're not going to meet for our own benefit, but what we'll do is we'll just make a cuppa for anybody who needs to come in, and we'll host that instead. Is, you know, we're not trying to add on to what we're already doing, but maybe adapt or lay some things down for a short period of time to actually say, we really care. We can't change the cost of living crisis at the moment. You know, we can campaign or do other things, but we can try and come alongside people and be somewhere they feel safe, where they can have a bit of company and where they can be warm for a little while. And if our gift and our resources as a church is our building and our people, and if we can get a little bit of funding so it doesn't even have to cost us money, we know this is a struggle for churches. Actually, I would ask why we couldn't do it.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tracey. It's a really compelling need at the moment, isn't there? And in some ways it's obvious what we've got to do, but also that is important we don't make those assumptions, and that we don't wait too long, but at the same time that we don't rush in and start charging off and doing something that's duplicating something that someone else is doing already.
And not to overcomplicate it either. It just needs to be simple. We can all make a cuppa or put the toaster out and a loaf of bread and some butter. That's not complicated. We can do that. We're not asking people to put on a whole program of activities. You might put out a newspaper on a table if people want to read that, or a book of crosswords, or a jigsaw out if somebody wants to stay for a couple of hours. You might just say, I'll sit down and I'll listen to a couple of people if they're lonely. We're not asking people to do a huge amount here. This is just basic one human being to another human being.
And so if people are listening into this conversation, either by themselves or together as a group within their church, what's the first things that they should be doing if they're feeling that maybe this is part of our community? What's the first thing that they should be doing, and how quickly do they need to start doing it?
So the household support fund that the government has given councils has to be spent by the end of September. So there is money available in councils now. So you could always go and ask your local councillor or the council, how are you spending your household support fund? Is there any money left over that we might be able to use if we feel this is the right space? There was also in the spring statement, the Chancellor had said that there would be more money for the winter. So we're hoping that by doing things now, we're building a bit of capacity for when we know it's going to be needed the most, which is October through to February. We know it's been really warm recently. What people are probably needing is a cold bank or a freezer, not a warm space. We've got enough of those in our own homes without putting the heating on. But this is about building capacity, because we know that once September, October comes, once those temperatures drop, things are going to really ramp up for people in terms of need. So have a conversation with your local councillor or your MP and ask them what's already been done. Is there anything we can link in with? Or if it isn't, what can you do to help? If we were to open our building up for a couple of hours every Monday or whatever for lunchtime, would that be welcomed? And how might you be able to support us to do that? And then also to have conversations with people you have connections with about what might look like, what's needed, or what time of day would be good to do it. And obviously see how many volunteers you can get. We want it to be a safe space. We don't want one person having to do it on their own. This is about maybe a team of 2 or 3 people. That's all. It doesn't need to be complicated, but start having those conversations, and maybe you'd be able to get a little bit of funding through the council as well.
Well, thanks very much, Tracey. That's a really helpful introduction and some really useful pointers there. And we pray God's blessing on all the work that you're doing, up in Newcastle, because there's some really amazing stuff there. And for you, if you're thinking about this might be something our church could do, this might be something our church could be doing with others, or actually we're already doing some of this and we'd love to share what you're doing as already and share your guidance and your experience with other people, please do get in touch. Let's join the dots and let's see what God's calling us to do that can make a difference for such a time as this.